that the projection screen in a movie theater is not just in order to project the film from the projection booth, but it's for you to project yourself.
Some actors enter Hollywood and instantly become stars. They appear at the right time, meet the right people, and everything seems perfectly arranged. But Christoph Waltz's story is quite different. Before the world knew him as one of the greatest actors in modern cinema, before the Oscar applause and the roles that went down in history, he lived a life that most audiences never saw. Born in Vienna, Austria in 1956, into a family with a strong artistic tradition, Waltz seemed destined to be an actor. He grew up surrounded by theater, costumes, and conversations about art. Later, he went on to study acting and even moved to New York for advanced training in one of the environments that has produced many big names in cinema. It all sounds like the perfect beginning for a future star. But life didn't go according to that script. Instead of Hollywood, Christoph Waltz spent much of his youth and middle age on German and Austrian television. Year after year, he appeared in television series, historical dramas, investigative films, and countless small roles that audiences watched and then forgot. He worked constantly, but didn't really make it big. No major awards, no breakthrough. No one called him a special talent. What disappointed Waltz most wasn't the lack of fame. It was the feeling of not being taken seriously. Someone once told him he was only suited for quirky supporting roles and unlikely to become the center of a major film. After decades of dedication, he began to wonder if he was pursuing something that would never happen. Then, at a point, he almost accepted that, until the day a director named Quentin Tarantino appeared. But interestingly, Christoph Waltz's life-changing opportunity didn't come from him trying harder, becoming more famous, or appearing in more projects. It came from someone facing exactly the kind of problem only an actor like him could solve. In the late 2000s, Quentin Tarantino was preparing for a project he had high hopes for, a war film set during World War II. The script featured a special character, Colonel Hans Landa. This wasn't the typical villain who appears to threaten and then disappears. Tarantino had created a man who was incredibly intelligent, polite, sophisticated, and capable of instilling fear in others with just a few words. The problem was, the more he perfected the character, the more he realized the role was almost impossible to cast. Hans Landa had to be multilingual. He had to switch emotions incredibly quickly. It had to be charming enough to captivate the audience, yet terrifying enough to set the entire room on edge with just a glance. Tarantino searched for months. Auditions followed one actor after actor, but no one had everything he needed. Then one day, an actor in his 50s walked into the room. Not a Hollywood star, not a box office draw. Just a man who had spent over 3 decades quietly working in the industry. Christoph Waltz began reading the script. He switched from French to English, from English to German, then continued with such naturalness that the entire room almost forgot it was just an audition. But what convinced Tarantino wasn't just his linguistic ability, it was Waltz's understanding of the character. He didn't portray Hans Landa as a typical villain. He made the character so polite, intelligent, and calmly terrifying. When the audition ended, Waltz politely thanked them and walked out. Inside the room, Tarantino looked at his colleagues and understood that his film had finally come to fruition. And Christoph Waltz had just stepped through the door that would change his entire life. When the film was released, almost no one asked who Christoph Waltz was anymore. Audiences went to the theater to see a Quentin Tarantino film. But when they left, what they remembered most was a character with a polite smile, a calm voice, and eyes that could make others lose their composure after just a few minutes on screen. Hans Landa is unlike the typical war villains. He doesn't yell. He doesn't lose his temper. He doesn't appear as a violent machine. On the contrary, this character always speaks softly, behaves politely, and sometimes even gives off a friendly vibe. But the more the audience watches, the more they realize that this is precisely what is most terrifying. Christoph Waltz has turned language into a weapon. In every dialogue, he makes the viewer feel as if Hans Landa knows more than he says. Every pause, every smile, every change of language is like a calculated move. Instead of creating tension through action, Waltz creates tension simply by the feeling that this character sees through everything. That's what makes the performance different. Even more astonishing is that this is almost the first time a large international audience has seen him. After more than 30 years in the profession, the man once considered only suitable for minor roles unexpectedly delivered one of the most acclaimed villain performances of the 21st century. Critics unanimously called it the great discovery of the year. Audiences began searching for who Christoph Waltz was and where he had been all those years. Then came the awards night. When his name was announced for the Best Supporting Actor Oscar, his entire journey of over 3 decades seemed to be compressed into a brief moment. Christoph Waltz was then over 50 years old. At an age when many would think a career has stabilized or is beginning to slow down, he became a new Hollywood star. People called it overnight success, but only he knew that one night took more than 30 years to happen. But what makes Christoph Waltz's story special isn't that he finally became famous. What's special is what happened afterward. Many actors have a role that defines their career and then gradually fade away. Audiences remember the character, but forget the person behind it. For Waltz, the real challenge began after he won an Oscar. At that point, everyone was asking the same question. Was this just a perfect moment, or was he truly an outstanding actor? Quentin Tarantino seemed to have the answer. Instead of having Waltz play another version of Hans Landa, he did the opposite. In his next project, Tarantino created a completely new character specifically for him, Dr. King Schultz. If Hans Landa was cold, manipulative, and dangerous, Schultz was intelligent, kind, and possessed a unique sense of humor. And once again, Christoph Waltz proved that his previous success was no accident. He appeared with the same mastery of dialogue and subtlety in every gesture, but this time, instead of frightening the audience, he made them love the character. In just a few years, Waltz accomplished something few actors have, creating one of the most memorable villains in modern cinema, and then immediately transforming into one of the most beloved characters. His second Oscar came as confirmation. After that, the doors of Hollywood opened wide. Waltz began appearing in bigger projects, collaborating with more renowned directors, and becoming a name recognized globally. Interestingly, wherever he went, he maintained a demeanor very different from the typical star image. When asked where his success came from, he once said he knew exactly how much of his career was due to luck. 100%. It sounds paradoxical, but perhaps what he meant wasn't that talent isn't important. Rather, it was that opportunity always has an element of randomness. The only thing a person can control is preparing long enough so that when opportunity arises, they are ready to seize it. And Christoph Waltz had been preparing for that moment for over 30 years.